I'm Jane Simon. I'm the Curator of Exhibitions at the Madison Museum of Contemporary Art, and every 3 years we do a show called the Wisconsin Triennial. Artists apply, and then we pick about 90 to 100 people. We visit people's studios all over the state, from Eau Claire to Milwaukee to Beloit and Lake Geneva to as far north. We went close to Superior once. And then from those 90 to 100 visits, we pick about 40 people to be in this show. And that's what this Wisconsin Triennial is now. Sometimes there are things that are straight out of the artist studio, like this painting behind me by Derek Bish, who's a Madison artist. It just came out of his studio. In fact, I know one of the plexiglass panels he finished on his spring break. And his work in the past had been interested or been exploring street signs. And in this case, it's more an exploration of his own intellectual pursuits, I would say. And all of the imagery in the painting comes from things that he's interested in. The O-N and the O-R reference a painter, a Texas painter named Vernon Fisher, so they come from his name, the letters of his name. This right here is a Native American symbol that Derek found in a book. This right here comes from a Nancy cartoon. That was very interesting. It's right here.
And it's repeated over in this?
It's repeated over in here. Now these are actually two separate pieces, but the large painting existed first, and then Derek chose to single out some of the parts of the painting to focus on them more. This is from a Japanese print. It's an ocean form from a Japanese print. And this hatching here comes from the first page of Moby Dick, where he says, "Call me Ishmael." And Ishmael, as you might know, is kind of a renegade prophet in Christian or Jewish mythology or thinking. And Derek took a lot of leeway with this, with just, appropriating symbols or visual cues from other things. So this is, I think, in some senses, a renegade painting for him in many ways. Oh, yeah, this piece is called Eye in the Sea Ocean Chart, and that one is called Ocean Size.
Great.
This is a work called The Legend of the White Snake by a Milwaukee artist named Jason Yee. Jason was born and raised in Korea, but he moved to this country when he was 11. For the last several years, he's been going to China for extended periods of times on residencies. And in this last trip to China, he asked the people that he was working with, the translators and the people in this one city, what they wanted other people to know about their culture. And they said, "Oh, we want people to know about the legend of the white snake." And the legend of the white snake is a story of two immortals that come down to earth. One is a green snake and one is a white snake. And the white snake falls in love with a mortal, with a human being. And she marries him and they have a baby. And one day, against her own will, she turns back into the white snake. And her husband enters the room, sneezes this white snake in the bed, and dies from a heart attack. And so she spends the rest of her time trying to get back the bliss and the happiness that she had with him in their domestic setting. So it's a tale of forbidden love, because immortals are not supposed to marry immortals. And it's also a tale of, love that can't be achieved, or love that can't be sustained. So this piece is made from PVC tube that Jason bought at Lowe's. Just regular PVC piping that's used in plumbing situations in the United States. He bought a lot of it. And he assembles it into this labyrinth form, which relates to how that tale exists in both Chinese culture and in our culture. We as Westerners maybe can't understand it the same way the Chinese can. And also it takes different forms and changes over time, even within Chinese culture. So that labyrinth of the piece relates to the life and metamorphosis of the legend. This is a frame within a frame within a frame. So it's gold leaf on the exterior out here. It's a totally idyllic European landscape with some, fawn here and some conifers. And then there's another frame within a frame, and this beautiful icy queen at the center who's holding a teacup. She has, a wig on, and she's looking, sort of defiantly and sort of mysteriously at the viewer. is a drawing by a woman named Claire Stigliani, who just finished getting her MFA, her Master's in Fine Arts at the university. And she was someone who was not born in Austria, but raised there. Her father was a scientist. And she was always fascinated by Austrian folklore or Austrian past. But what's interesting to me is that this artist, Claire Stigliani, is able to show us, with a frame, within a frame, within a frame, all of these ideas visually, which I also think is fascinating. She shows us in many ways the Austrian countryside, which relates to Marie Antoinette's childhood. She shows us her defiance and her demeanor as a French queen, which is what we see here when she's wearing the pink dress and she's sitting on a gilded throne. She shows us a little bit about the renovations that the French queen went through by the architecture in the back. And she also shows us a little bit about why we might be fascinated by somebody like Marie Antoinette, because she's this beautiful, icy queen with gorgeous green eyes or bluish eyes, and this very queenly wig also on her head. And also tea with Marie, it suggests that we could, in our minds at least, sit down and have a cup of tea with Marie Antoinette, with Queen. These other ones relate to this as well. So it's Marie Antoinette again with this very, very hairy child and another fawn. This is a very, very hairy figure. It's also on a found piece of paper, which is sort of like a map-like thing, and a very idyllic, dreamy landscape. And then this one relates to an Austrian legend that says that the devil is always around us. And so it's a very beautiful figure. She's wearing like a red cape, almost like Little Red Riding Hood. And she's just gorgeous, very much, kind of like Kate Moss and Claudia Schiffer combined. But her hand is a very, very furry paw, and this shows us that the devil is there and he can't totally hide himself. Alison Stellick is now working in Green Bay, but she was born and raised in the UP, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which has the highest concentration of Finnish persons outside of Finland. And she was always fascinated by the architecture of where she grew up, and by the fact that some people still spoke Finnish, which is I think, very, very interesting. About a year ago, she got a residency in northern Finland, I think 10 or 15 miles inside the Arctic Circle, where people, they use sleds in the winter, and they have adapted to life there. It's a pretty isolated part, but not an unsophisticated part of the world. She was fascinated by this and fascinated by the fact that she still had genealogy in that part of the world. So she started to do a lot of research, and she realized that she could find out a lot. She could find out what her ancestors were, she could find out when they were born and when they died, but she didn't know much else about them. She didn't know what they felt or what they thought, or the ins and outs of their daily life. So then she made a whole series of sculptures that would deal with this. And every sculpture has a name. Santa, in this case, born 1522, died 1560. And then they have these wonderful heads and this wonderful hair, which relate to the fact that we can know certain things about our ancestors, but we can't know other things. So in this case, they might have strange noses, they might have dots for eyebrows, and they might have this beautiful spun hair, which obviously relates to European history, but also relates to the grandiosity of this imaginary journey into our personal past. I'll find you one. Some of them relate to people who have not lived yet. This is Fran, who was born in 2079 and will die in 2191. So that's totally imaginary. Fran is totally imaginary. But some of these others, like Bert, who was born in 1945 and died in 2003, could have been her uncle,
So in this one here, this Emily,
with the Marge Simpson hair.
With the Marge Simpson hair, and then this thing jutting out is like a deformity.
Yeah. Yeah. Or a reinterpretation even too, yeah. We don't know how she wore her hair. We don't know anything about her other than the fact that she was born and that she died.
Right, and then there's that one, you think that's like an eye? Like one of those Turkish sort of evil eyes or something? This one, she's got her closed eyes here, but then she's got like a third eye like that.
Could be. And we don't know if this is a mole or some kind of genetic, improvement that could be possible in the future.
Right, in the future we'll all have some yarn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Comes in